This lecture is going to cover the metabolism of xenobiotics from a nutritional perspective. The learning outcomes are definitions of what xenobiotics actually are, how xenobiotics are metabolized by the human body, the tissues that are involved, the enzymatic processes, and the various chemical reactions that are associated with this metabolism. We're also going to cover some examples of commonly consumed xenobiotics, and then a little on the significance of xenobiotics in the human diet as it reflects in the context of health and disease. So a definition of a xenobiotic is a chemical, such as a drug, pesticide, or carcinogen, or in some cases what we'd consider properties of foods that have beneficial effects in the body but actually don't have any nutritive effect. And I'll get into what I mean about that with some examples a little bit later. But these are found in an organism but are not normally produced or expected to be present in this particular organism, and therefore are regarded as foreign. The biological significance of xenobiotics are that humans constantly ingest various foreign chemicals, both intentional and unintentional. And these foreign chemicals can be in the form of pollutants, pesticides, drugs, food additives, or just constituents of foods which don't have any nutritive properties. And the body recognizes these as xenobiotic or foreign. So examples would be, as we just mentioned, drugs, insecticide residues on foods. If you've consumed contaminated water or plant material that contains polychlorinated biphenyls, plasticizers can leach into food products when you use them for heating and long-term storage, repeated storage of foods. Cyanides, plant phenolic compounds, and dioxins are some common examples. So generally, xenobiotic metabolism follows the ADEM system of metabolism. This includes absorption, where you have either absorption of the xenobiotic through the GI tract, through the skin, lungs, or some other entry into the body. Then there's distribution. So this is dependent upon the nature, the chemical nature of the xenobiotic in question. So if it's hydrophilic, it will associate more with the aqueous portions of the body, versus if it's lipophilic, it will then tend to be found in fat-rich tissues. Metabolism is the activation or deactivation of the particular xenobiotic, and then there's an excretion step where it's either excreted post-metabolism in breath, sweat, feces, urine, or some other means to get it out of the body. So the body removes xenobiotics by converting them into metabolites that are either more polar or more easily excreted by the kidney or some other route out of the body. Generally, the main organ involved in this particular function is the liver, but it also to some extent involves the gut, because the gut microbiota will also play a role in xenobiotic metabolism in some cases. Excretion routes tend to be mainly through urine, but there is also through feces, and this can be when there's interactions in the GI tract, but also through direct delivery of these xenobiotics back into the gut lumen via the bile or pancreatic secretions. Breath and sweat for volatile compounds is also a means of elimination of xenobiotic when it's been metabolized. So compounds that are not metabolized but which are water soluble and somehow find their way into the body may be secreted or excreted in an unmodified form, and this could be something similar to sucralose, but unmodifiable or unmetabolized fat-soluble components, they will accumulate in the body, and these are things like polychlorinated biphenyls or dioxins. So the majority of xenobiotic metabolism is carried out by a class of enzymes called the Cytochrome P450 family of enzymes, and expression of enzymes in the CYP family is induced by exposure to the particular xenobiotic in question. So various CYP enzymes have broad range of substrates which lead to their activation, and in so doing they can effectively break down compounds other than one specific target compound. So generally they'll react to a class of chemicals or a class of molecules and get switched on. Competitive inhibition can occur between substrates for some of the CYP enzymes, and this can cause activation or inactivation of certain compounds at different rates, but it also can lead to the accumulation of toxins or toxic metabolites in the body, depending on how severe and regular the competition is. Bacteria in the testing can also contribute to the metabolism of xenobiotics because they can actually metabolize some compounds, and the resulting compounds are then recognized by the body as xenobiotic, or will actually activate or inactivate some compounds, which can then proceed through the CYP enzyme pathways. So in terms of food, it's xenobiotic, and the way we've been describing it so far, it sounds like chemical contamination of food to some extent. But in actual fact, there are a lot of chemicals in our food which are naturally occurring in these particular food items. So things like glucosinates, these are sulfur-containing compounds that are present in things like mustard and cabbage, or allium, which are found in the allium species. Then there's alkaloids, things like caffeine or theobromide, plant phenolics like quercetin or isoflavones. Then there's polyaromatic hydrocarbons that are produced when you char food, so anything that's been barbecued or char-grilled, you will get the production of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And then there's the nicotine-related compounds, like things that are found in tobacco leaves when you smoke cigarettes or cigars or whatnot. This gives you an example of just one class of those chemical compounds, polyphenols. And when they're found in our diet, you can see that they fall under several different categories, and you may recognize some of these types of flavonoids in particular as being more recently looked at as being very positive in terms of their effect on the body. But I'm listing them here in the xenobiotic lecture just to make you aware that because these are non-nutritive compounds and there's no direct function of these requirement of these particular chemicals in our body, they are recognized as xenobiotic and are processed in such a way to remove them. This is part of the reason why when you're doing the type of research where you're looking at changes in polyphenols or flavonoids following, say, some type of berry consumption or juice consumption, that it's very difficult to measure, and it's usually short-term periods of time after you've consumed them, these particular flavonoids, that you can actually measure them in the blood, and that's because they are metabolized quite rapidly by the body for removal. This diagram is outlining to some degree why xenobiotics are recognized by the Cytochrome P450 enzyme pathways and eliminated from the body. Because while we recognize that some of these compounds that we have in foods are safe and in some cases actually have beneficial effects in our bodies, there are a lot of chemicals which are in very similar types or classes of chemicals which do not have positive effects on our body. And an example is if you look at estrogen receptors throughout our body. We have these estrogen receptors everywhere in our brains, thymus, breast, vascular tissue, prostate tissue, in our bones, ovaries, uterus, as well as our bladders. So these receptors respond to hormones and react to hormones that are produced endogenously in our body, and these include things like beta estradiol or estriol. However, there is weak binding activity to these receptors by other chemicals like bisphosphonyl A, which is a plasticizer, which we may remember has been more recently removed as a plasticizer for plastics that are used for human food storage or regular human use in relation to the food industry. Dibutyl phthalate is another example of a chemical which would have negative effects, cancer-causing effects in our body, but is recognized. But then you see genistein on the bottom there, which is a isoflavone, which has been noted to have positive properties. So the metabolism proceeds through what's called phase 1 and phase 2 xenobiotic metabolism, and for the most part it involves the monooxygenase enzymes or cytochrome P450s. I'm going to note here that this is not the type of a reaction that maybe used to if you look at it, say, something like the Krebs cycle or glycolysis, where you see a procedure of following one step to the next step in terms of enzyme activation and enzyme activity. Cytochrome P450 are a family of enzymes, and xenobiotic metabolism in general is not something like a turning on and off of a switch, and the switch referring to one particular enzyme. This is more akin to something like a tornado effect. So when you consume a meal, you're consuming hundreds, if not thousands, of different chemicals that are recognized as xenobiotic. And so this doesn't just turn on one particular enzyme. This is turning on an entire family of hundreds of thousands of enzymes to remove these chemicals from your body in a quick and efficient manner. So bear that in mind when you're thinking of this. It's not a one step followed by another with light switches on and off, or one enzyme product feeding into the next. It doesn't follow that particular pathway. This is also a good example of why people sometimes have difficulty deriving benefit for some of these chemicals like polyphenols and isoflavones when they're in our diet, because not only do the polyphenols turn on these sets of reactions for xenobiotic metabolism, but so do all the other chemicals that you're consuming at the same time. And so the processing or metabolism and elimination of these positive chemicals is accentuated or sped up because of the fact that there is an entire suite of enzymes turned on to deal with them. But generally, going back to the phase 1 and phase 2 metabolism, phase 1 metabolism refers to basically hydroxylation of a particular chemical to make it more water soluble, so it can be recognized by the kidney and the renal processes for elimination. It doesn't only include hydroxylation, it could also include deamination, dehalogenation, desulfuration, epoxidation, peroxygenation, or reduction or hydrolysis reactions. But the main goal of phase 1 is to improve the water solubility of a particular chemical in order for it to participate in phase 2 reactions, which will then help it be recognized by the kidney tissue, the renal tissue, for excretion. So phase 2 involves conjugation. So here, this is where you're adding on additional components to the particular chemical or particular xenobiotic. So this could be things like glucuronic acid, a sulfate or an acetate group, a methyl group, possibly glutathione, or particular amino acids. The goal of which is to, again, increase the water solubility and improve the efficiency of excretion from the body. So overall, the goal of the two phases of xenobiotic metabolism is to increase the water solubility of a particular chemical compound, and therefore increase its excretion in urine via the kidneys. Without chemical modification, to increase the polarity or water solubility of lipophilic and hydrophobic xenobiotics, these compounds would begin to accumulate in adipose tissue and fat. And so this is one of the reasons why you see that a very short period of time by which these chemicals are appearing in plasma or in the blood, and why this particular enzyme pathway for elimination is so efficient and, as I said earlier, turned on in such a tornado style effect. It's a massive reaction to remove potentially cancer-causing or damaging chemicals from the body. And in particular, if they begin to be stored in fat-rich tissues, they become increasingly difficult to remove from the body. So all of these reactions in general are involved in the conversion of foreign compounds to water-soluble excretable compounds, and this is referred to as detoxification or biotransformation reactions. So just coming back to phase 1 metabolism for a second, the potential effects of phase 1 metabolism in terms of the biological activity of particular compounds is interesting, because passing through or reacting in a phase 1 reaction can possibly activate or inactivate a particular compound. And there are good examples of this, and I think I have one in the associated reading that you'll find on the virtual campus, where you can see that some enzymes, or some particular polyphenols, moving through this pathway actually gain their positive action by passing through phase 1 metabolism first before they're eliminated through phase 2, after phase 2 metabolism. So a particular compound can be activated following phase 1, and then it's referred to as a prodrug or procarcinogen, depending on what type of action it has and depending on the nature of the compound. Hydroxylation is the main step in phase 1 reactions, and monooxygenase reactions are involved in the detoxification of xenobiotics. Phase 2 metabolism. Phase 2 reactions add hydrophilic functional groups to increase the water solubility to an even greater extent than the hydroxylation steps of phase 1. And the addition of these conjugates tends to reduce their bioactivity. So once something's been glucuronidated or sulfated, or has a sulfate or methyl group added to it, it begins to lose its ability to have a biological function, and it increases the likelihood that it's going to be excreted by the kidney or lost to hepatobiliary secretions. So coming back for a second to Cytochrome P450 and the family of enzymes, they're a superfamily of heme thiolate enzymes. So there are at least 2,700 individual CYP enzymes. Most of these are microsomal or endoplasmic membrane-bound enzymes, which means these are not generally floating around in plasma reacting with things that are extracellular. They are contained within a cell. So the detoxification steps that we're referring to here are occurring in the intracellular environment, not in the open space of the circulation. The majority of xenobiotics tend to be metabolized by CYP34A, CYP2C family, CYP1A1, as well as CYP1A2 and CYP1B1. This is the largest, this group of enzymes in these particular families tend to do most of the metabolic work when it comes to removing xenobiotics. The induction of CYPs via compounds. The induction of the CYP system is via these particular compounds acting as ligands for specific nuclear hormone receptors, such as the peroxisome proliferator receptor, or PPAR, PXR, or other nuclear hormone receptors like androstenedione receptor. So this slide is just illustrating how when a chemical is passing through this particular system for elimination, it can actually be, the products that are formed can actually become more toxic. Or, at the same time, passing through a very similar system, they can be detoxified and become harmless. And so if you look at the example of methanol and ethanol, both methanol and ethanol are oxidized in a similar fashion. However, the end product of methanol oxidation or elimination is actually formic acid, which is a toxic substance in itself. Therefore, methanol toxicity tends to be more related to the formation of the formic acid in the process of eliminating the methanol from the body, as opposed to the detoxification of ethanol, where the end product is acetic acid. And this final slide is just illustrating how in this particular case, it's non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, but which are recognized by the body as xenobiotic as well. So drugs, as well as the constituents of food, tend to be recognized as xenobiotic in nature. How, when they do make a pass through the liver or other tissues, you can see here in this illustration that they are not just metabolized by one particular pathway, and they can enter into several different pathways simultaneously, with the end result being excretion of an inactive metabolite, or in this particular case NSAID, via the urine. And so here you can see passing through to becoming glucuronidated, or hydroxylated, sulfated, or some other form of metabolite. Either way, all getting picked up in the renal tissue and excreted in urine. So think of this diagram when you're looking at it from all perspectives, including those constituents of food which we consider as being positive constituents of food. So this short lecture is meant to give you a brief overview of what xenobiotics are and what types of chemicals would be considered xenobiotic by our body. And these include both positive and negative chemicals found in our food, so things from polyphenols, which are known to have positive effects, as well as carcinogens produced in cooking methods, various cooking methods, or found in plasticizers related to food storage and in plastic containers. So our body is seeing these chemicals on a regular basis. They are seeing them daily, usually with every single meal we consume, in individual foods even. And this is the system that's in place to remove these chemicals. Because there's no specific use for these chemicals in our body, the same way that there will be for things like glucose or fatty acids, they are removed once they're recognized as foreign. And then this is the procedures that they follow. I've posted some additional reading for you, which goes into much more detail. In particular, you should look at the foreign compound section, but then also look at the other sections of the review that I posted, because it gives you a good indication of how the CYP enzyme system is used by our body even for activation and deactivation of endogenously produced things like hormones or steroids. So it's a good background reading for this particular topic. So in terms of learning outcomes or understanding understanding tasks, you should be able to identify at least 2 dietary components which are considered xenobiotic and which would be metabolized via this pathway. So I've given you the polyphenols example, so you should be able to look through constituents of various foods and come up with some other ones just for yourself as a working example. One example should be a dietary component that is non-nutritive but has been shown or suggested to have positive health effects, and another should be one which is non-nutritive and shown to be harmful to humans. And just work through those yourself as a working example. How are they metabolized? What foods are they found in? What risk do they pose, or what positive aspects do they pose for individuals with particular conditions? And then outline for yourself the brief route that these dietary xenobiotics would take from entering into the body to excretion from the body, and what are the long-term consequences of consuming those particular xenobiotics and in particular at increasing concentrations or frequency in our diets. So that's all on xenobiotics. If you have any questions, feel free to pop me an email or, like I said, refer to the reading that I've posted on the VC.